Welcome to Talking of Business today. Today we're talking about opening a second location for Financial Friday. So how can you financially fund that second location and scale there? We're also going to be talking about neglect in the workplace, whether that be from upper management, or the employee themselves. Here's the show. My soundboard's not working.
Not working. Wow, what great intro music there, Jordan.
Wait, here it is.
It's Friday.
It's Friday. Yeah, that's the only issue with doing the stream on the cloud is that you're at the mercy of the cloud. Welcome to Talking of Business, guys. I'm your host, Jordan Disberger, joined by me, my dad, co-host, Russell Disberger.
Hi, Jordan.
Are you having a good Friday, Dad?
So far, been productive. How about yourself?
Today is an easy day for me, so it's been very unproductive. This is the first productive thing I'm doing, but there's a big list of things that I plan on achieving today, which is what I do every day, and some days are better than others. So let's jump to our first topic here. Okay, so for Financial Friday, we have a business, and I'm just going to set up kind of the field and then ask the question based on that. So let's say there's a business, they've got their operations figured out, they feel like they're in a pretty good place, and they don't have the cash to outright go ahead and open up a second location. And you really wouldn't want to just put straight cash into opening a second location. That's not the best use of your money to just immediately throw it at that. If you can get a pretty good financial deal to open up a second location. So let's talk about that, Dad. How can we open a second location from a financial perspective, or a third, a fourth, a fifth?
Well, so from a financial standpoint, there is a number of things that you have to take in consideration, and one of them is cash flow. A lot of times when an owner duplicates an existing business, that they're probably what I would call very much stuck in the business. Their part of it is a technician. So if you're going to double, what you have to do is be able to have enough cash flow and enough reserves to rebuy, obviously, all the assets and enough working cash flow to be able to do it and to be able to hire somebody. Because if you're working full time in the other, and now you're spread over two, you go more from a technician to a supervisor working on the two businesses. So you have to make sure that you've done at least a feasibility study, understanding that there is going to be a ramp up and a growth, and you should stress that, meaning that once you look at your target, you look at ideal, and then you look at a conservative to make sure that you have the ability to go out and procure the loan that you might need, and you can withstand the cash flow. A lot of times individuals will find it very difficult and duplicating what they've done in one location into a different, because they're not there every day operating it. They don't have their systems in place because they've done it with their gut, their feelings, or their experience. They did a poor job training and developing. So from a financial perspective, you need to make sure that you have training, development, a leadership pipeline in place. You have to have enough money to be able to hire somebody else, and obviously secure enough of a loan to be able to duplicate it. Going to a third place is really the ultimate challenge. So doing two is difficult. Going to a third is really hard, because now all your systems are critical. All your processes and your leadership pipeline is what you really bank on. And so if you have not truly migrated to a leadership management position, working on the business rather than in it, you're going to need an enormous amount of cash flow and or cash reserves to be able to even consider that. So it's always best financially is to understand what the cash requirements are going to be. And secondly, you're setting up the systems and processes. Everything you're doing should be duplicatable. You need to be training and developing people like no tomorrow if you're planning to grow.
From a cash flow perspective, when you're doing these studies, you're taking a look at this ramp up rate that you're expecting for the next location, potentially the third location as well, and you're including that into your cash flow. You're not saying that the single first store should sustain both stores for the longevity of it. Maybe at the beginning, in order for you to buy those assets.
You should have a budget. You should have a budget per location, but there will be overhead now that will be applied to both locations because you're going to be developing a central management, which ideally the cost of overhead that was on one is actually going to be smaller now that there's two. So there will be economies of scale, and ideally, once the second location is mature enough, profitability should be higher, and that's the reason why you would want to expand. So you're right. They need to make sure that they understand the cash drag because you don't typically start a business unless you're a restaurant and get immediate flock of business. Restaurants are kind of funny where people will normally come and try you, test you out, and then they may not come back. They may ghost you. If their experience wasn't great, you could be tanked in a very short order.
I think your economies of scale point is something that's important to uh, realize here, especially when you're wanting to open up a new restaurant. If you think of yourself as simply uh, simplifying it down to a manufacturing plant, if you just buy additional machines and the demand is there, you're simply increasing your capacity to supply.
Right.
And so the economies of scale, you just have to pay for the additional machine. And so you don't want to get all worked up at, oh, my expenses are going to double because of the economies of scale there. So I think that's important. And then I think the other most critical element that you had stated, it isn't really a financial perspective. It's operations perspective, but getting those systems and operations really nailed down. And so if you are in a business and you're not actually having to spend a significant amount of time in that business because you've got the systems and processes lined up, you are and there's demand there, you're in a pretty good and prime position where you can start exploring that second store. You don't want to start exploring the second store just because you had a great revenue year. That's not the sign to go and open the second store.
So one of the things that, and I know this is not the topic, but when they choose the second location, they don't understand what made them great. Sometimes they lose sight of their target market. They focus more on rents. This would be a great location due to the price. We can steal this. Everything you do has to be about how do we maximize cash flow, which means you have to have enough revenue to sustain. So doing a site plan, site analysis, not just based on rent, but what will this place drive? I know people that pay $150 a square foot for retail space in a resort community, where in another community they're paying $6 a square foot retail space. And that's an annualized number based on the square feet. And you can see that's quite dramatic. But believe it or not, the people that are paying 150 cash flow very well because the location that they're in generates enough walk by traffic that they don't have to market and advertise. So you have to run the numbers, you have to understand the pros and the cons and look at the revenue you need to sustain and the cash flow. And you want to obviously minimize risk.
Right. That works for the businesses that have an in-office where customers come in. If you're a manufacturing plant, your site selection is going to be completely different. All right, well, that does it for Financial Friday for us. Oh, my board's not working again. Whoosh! All right, so the main topic today that I wanted to discuss is neglect. So, Dad, one thing that I wanted to ask you, and I'm honestly very curious of, is what are some examples of neglect that you've seen through your thousands of companies that you've worked with? What are some of the most dramatic examples of neglect off the top of your head that you can think of?
People are focused more on the acquisition of new clients rather than at times the maintenance of existing. And the entire focus is to grow sometimes the top line revenue rather than expanding and servicing the clients. So neglect, from a customer standpoint, I see that they get complacent and they almost take the relationship for granted. Um, it's right now, I'm going to pick on Microsoft. I've used Microsoft products for quite a while, and their tech support, when there's a bug on my computer, they'll actually get on and help me fix it. This last go around, and I still have this problem. There's an issue migrating from one version of Outlook to another that has actually broken an element of what I used to do. The new version can do it, but what they're telling me to do is actually delete something and move something else over. But during the chat where I'm trying to figure it out, there is a day delay and sometimes 2 days delay between a response to the person that's providing the tech support. So I have now been working on this project trying to solve this problem for 20 days, where before in a few minutes. So my loyalty to Microsoft is almost, I mean, I'm losing opportunity, I'm losing time. It is to the point that I'm fed up.
So from Microsoft's perspective, Dad, I know that like a big corporation like Honeywell, we have dedicated IT specialists because we buy so much from Microsoft that we get quicker response time than you would as a individual single proprietor. So you feel that there is neglect
Oh,
from
massive.
customer experience side for single individuals that are purchasing these software packages from Microsoft.
I mean, if their target audience is major enterprises and that's all they want to be known for, well, their PCs and everything else targeting to the general consumer and their mission of having a computer on everyone's desk at work and at home, um, there is going to go out the window because people are going to get so fed up with this kind of tech. I even asked, is there a better way? Is there something else? I'd be willing to pay for this to get this result. But the response rate and the guy's, he's nice, but it's not helpful.
The
It's
only
frustrating.
the only other time I think I've seen you get angry externally, there was always us as children being ornery, and you get angry at us and discipline us. But the only other time I saw you get angry at another external entity was at Volvo, a company with which you had extreme loyalty to, and I think it was a similar situation. If you want to explain.
Well, so I had a car that had 100,000 mile VIP bumper to bumper warranty, and it made a noise continually that was a metallic sound. And I brought it in 3, 4, 5 times to try to get it fixed, and they could never figure out the problem. When I made the appointment the last time, I had 99,000 and like 800 and some, but I had to drive it to the dealership, which was 200 miles away. So I hit over 100,000 by the time I got there. Well, this time they actually figured out the solution, and it was a $2,000 repair. All right. So I said, well, because I brought this in many times before and I have to stay in a hotel to get the car worked on while I'm doing it because I so much love the car and I really loved the product and the safety features and everything that Volvo stood for. But the dealership said, no, it's out of warranty. You have to pay for it all. So then I even elevated it to customer service at Volvo, and they said, we stand by our dealer because they're our primary customer. And I says, but even if the dealer's wrong, and they said, we'll just support the dealer. And I was just livid. So I ended up talking to the owner's son of that dealership, and they were just they didn't care if they lost the customer, and I've not owned a Volvo since.
That's not true.
When did I buy another one?
You bought me one.
Oh, what? Well, it was for you, not me. And I didn't buy it from a dealer, and it wasn't new, and it had no warranty.
That's true.
We bought something that was a not a beater, but it was slightly above a beater for a college car.
Yeah, it was a nice car. So that's another example of neglect from customer service
Well,
side.
and now I have. So what I told them is that I'm a keynote speaker. I'm an executive consultant, and a strategist, and I will for the rest of my life tell people about this experience. Is this really what you want to do to your brand? That didn't budge them at all. So the Volvo dealership in Colorado Springs do not go to. They changed ownership.
And what do you drive now, Dad?
I drive an Acura.
And you had an Audi before then as well, so
That's right.
not Volvos, but still. Well, Acura's your first Japanese brand. Anyway, so I wanna contrast that slightly. So Jay, my oldest brother, your oldest son, he had a similar experience, and this was ridiculous. He bought a used iPhone from someone else, and it started to go bad after a couple of months, and he contacted Apple and he said, hey, I spend a lot of money here and this thing went bad and I want you guys to fix it. And he's just a college student. He maybe spent, $3,000-$4,000, very minuscule amount to, a $3 trillion company, probably, 800 billion at the time. But they fixed it. They took his phone, bought from another individual a used iPhone, and they took it and they repaired it. I can't remember what exactly the issue
It was even out of warranty.
It was out of warranty. It was an iPhone 7 Plus. So and this was when the iPhone 10 was out. So it was 3.5 years old, and they took it and fixed it. That is an example of excellent and going above and beyond customer experience. And I think Apple stands by their brand there. So the opposite of neglect there.
Yeah, I mean, Apple, I'm very loyal to customers that take care of me. I get fed up and I hate being treated as a number. And I understand it's really hard and you're trying to save money and we're trying to optimize profit, but at what cost? There's a thing called the value chain within a business, and there's three things that you spend money on, or that you look at for how your dollars are spent. One is it to maximize profit? Is it to help improve the culture or to improve customer satisfaction? So when you're spending money and it hurts one of those things, it's something you need to reevaluate. And sometimes people forget the customer because of their complacency, the neglect, and people will slowly but surely migrate away.
So that's a policy from the company as a whole down to the customer experience side. So let's talk about neglect of the management to an employee. What examples have you seen of that through your experience?
Well, so I mean, this is very common. I've hired you to do a job. Dang it, Jordan, you should just do it. And, I throw you a bone. If you have questions, I want you to ask me. But I do very little to develop you. I do very little to challenge you. And sometimes I get so busy, it's just easier for me to do it myself. And I don't give you the chance to expand your responsibility to learn new things. So, in a sense, I'm thinking more about getting the work done and not about you, your growth, your development in your future. And so when employees see that their managers not even that they don't care about them personally, they're not challenging or helping them grow, and they're just treating them as a number, there's no loyalty, there's no love. And just like a customer, it's easy to quit that company. The primary reason why employees quit is their boss. And if you don't become sticky, if you're not like a servant leader trying to figure out what you need to do to support that person, if you're the micromanager or you have a tendency to just do it yourself, you're typically harming the individual. There was a gal that is working at Wichita State, and she quoted me when I was doing a PDP readback with her, and she was talking about how she had a tendency to hold things and do things herself. And she said, and it's hard for me to imagine that she is strangling the growth of her direct reports. I used the word strangling, and I was like, that's a little harsh. I said there must be a little bit more.
What city was she from?
Wichita State or Wichita, Kansas. She works at Wichita State University now.
This the irony there is that Wichita, Kansas, is the home to some of the most prolific serial killers of all time.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, anyhow, so long story short is that she has never forgot, because what I said, a lot of times she said I was trying to help them by just doing it myself, not to burden them. I said, no, what you're doing is you're preventing them from growing, learning, and challenging. Plus, if you're not giving them tasks to do, that tells you don't trust them. An employee does not enjoy their boss not trusting them, and that will cause them to contemplate leaving. So you're choking their potential to grow. And so I told her to just, you got to stop this. And this is one of the most common things I see managers do. They just are focused on getting the work done, and rather than developing that leadership pipeline that has to be, I mean, it's the most valuable asset, not the employees. Your leadership pipeline is the most valuable asset in any company, because that's the only thing that will promise continuation of that organization.
That's great insight and an interesting choice of words from her, from a prolific serial killer city.
I got to find out who that guy or person is.
There's several serial killers from there. It's
not Jack the Ripper or anything. That's in London.
It's very well known. I don't want to get too far into it, but
Okay,
there's BTK. He's a very prolific one who wasn't found for a very long time, and he's one of the people who would taunt the media. So you have the Zodiac killer, and then you have like BTK. Those are two of the most studied serial killers of all time. I think he's in jail now. Anyway, so I want to go to the last bit of neglect. So managers, we've gone from customer experience and kind of that whole tone of, hey, we're going to treat the customer with awesome customer service. I want to give you an example, and I want you to relate it to a company. So I'm in my house here. I have a couple of leaks on my roof, and every day that weighs on me, and I know I need to go get it fixed, because it will damage the house over time. And me not calling or not doing anything about it is neglect. So what situations do you see in businesses that are equivalent to a roof having a leak in it, that you often see business owners or business executives ignoring in lieu of neglect?
Well, so I typically relate it to how many people are driving around with the check engine light on their car. Their car's running, it's working, but they know they need to check it. Something's wrong, but I've seen people put tape over the light. Some people put their phone to try to block it.
Or an apple.
Yeah, an apple. Like, thank you, Jordan.
We ran out of gas.
I had an apple blocking the gauge of how much fuel I had. Long story short, what happens in business is that people will ignore indicators because they think or they hope that it'll just work its way out. But the key is that, like a dashboard or an instrument panel, you should have little controls or leading indicators that are predictive of what's going to happen. And a good leader and a good manager is going to be proactive rather than reactive. It's like when a part breaks, or like, Jordan, if you allow your house to leak, you're going to hurt the drywall. You're going to potentially have mold. You're going to have to maybe replace the insulation, but the cost factor is going to go up. Rather than paying someone $100, $200 to repair it now, your bill's going to now be $2,000. Same thing with the check engine light. You may end up needing to replace the engine. Maybe there's all these other issues, or you get in an accident. Um, what being proactive and understanding the cause and the effect of things is what we need to do. Sticking your head in the sand is very, very, very costly. And so I typically tell individuals to understand, and there's a tool that I use called the balance scorecard that helps people understand the cause and effect. And maybe that's another episode, but we look at things from an employee perspective, a systems perspective, internal operations, and then a customer perspective, and then financial. So if I want to hit, let's say, $1 million in revenue, or 10 million, or 100 million, or $1 billion in revenue, what's the perspective that the customer needs to have to be able to drive that? All right, going back to our previous conversation. And then what systems and processes need to be in place that will drive that satisfaction, that love, that loyalty to drive that $1 billion revenue sale? And then what training, development, and strategies do I need to put in place around my employees to be able to execute the systems to satisfy the customer to drive that? So looking at the balance scorecard and understanding your cause and effect will give people a chance to move. A lot of times they don't monetize the problem. They just think it might resolve, or they pray it doesn't matter, or we've always had it this way. But monetizing the problems, I can go in and, let's say, cost of turnover. I've had an employee clients that had over 300% turnover. So think about that. Replacing your entire staff 3 times every year. That's just boom. Training, development, all of the cost was astronomical, but they were still making a very healthy profit.
Yeah.
So I monetized that pain for them, and they were able to understand that, gee, an investment of under $1 million could save them over, I think it was $7 million annually, or they could ignore it. So it's up to them. The opportunity cost was enormous. And so they opted to do that. And we worked on this problem for over 10 years to correct it. And today their unemployment is under 10%. And
That's
it has been for about 10 years.
that's awesome. Likening it back to your car gauge, if your check engine light comes on and you're under the mindset of, oh, it's always been like that, you're not going to know if there's another engine problem coming up. Just like if you neglect some of these other signals that might be coming from your company, you may not see it, or you may just decide to ignore that as well, and then you have a bunch of stuff piling up, and then you got to bring in Aspen Business Group.
Well, I mean, it's everything. I had water erosion on my yard, and I finally figured out what was causing it. People were putting Band-Aids, contractors that I had hired. And it wasn't until I just built a little bit of a dam all the way at the top of the hill that diverted water, stopped the erosion. Now I got to go back through and do mitigation of my yard.
This guy, he's like, we built a little wall. We built the wall. He had his kids build the wall. It was a big wall. It was a retaining wall.
It was 150 feet long, 4.5 feet tall. I don't know what you're complaining about.
I was 9. All right. Well, that's all we got for you on the show today. If you like this show, share it with a friend. Like us, subscribe to us on YouTube, whatever you listen to podcasts on. Follow us on social media. We're on TikTok, Instagram, and we'll have another guest next week. My dad will be missing a couple episodes next week because he's going to the busiest airport in the world. So we'll catch you then. It's supposed to be doing the outro music now.
It's streaming really slowly. Huh?
I don't know what's going on. All right, that's it. All right. Thank you, Dad. We ended up not doing your exercise to build the stuff, mainly because we really like our straws and we don't have 40 to spare. We use them all the time for smoothies.
So Janae and I, Mom wouldn't play with me. What I wanted to know is, how long did it take?
Yeah. Kristen was thinking that your 15 minutes and 15 minutes was pretty good because you want to create a little bit of stress as well.
Well, I was thinking that would be stupid long.
That might be long.
Well, actually, so with Janae,